Sarah Chen stared at her reflection in the polished surface of the quantum maintenance panel, barely recognizing the person looking back. Dark circles hung under her eyes, testament to countless sleepless nights spent learning alien engineering protocols. 6 months ago, she'd been Earth's rising star in quantum mechanics. Now she was scrubbing coolant conduits on a backwater Valerian maintenance station. The soft blue glow of quantum matrices illuminated the cramped maintenance shaft around her. Above, the towering forms of Valerian engineers moved with practiced grace, their crystalline bodies refracting light as they manipulated impossibly complex machinery with their four-fingered hands. They never looked down at her, not anymore. They'd given up even mockery weeks ago. "Human Chen," a melodic voice chimed from above. "Your sector's efficiency rating has dropped 0.03% below acceptable parameters." Sarah bit back a sharp reply. Station Officer Zolix might look like a walking crystal sculpture, but he wielded authority like a blade. "Yes, officer. The quantum fluctuations in this sector are particularly dense today. I'm compensating manually." Manually. Zylix managed to make the word sound like a disease. "If you would simply interface with the quantum matrices like a civilized being." "I can't interface directly with your technology," Sarah interrupted, immediately regretting her tone. "Human neural architecture isn't compatible with." Yes. Your species' limitations are well documented." Zylix's crystalline form shimmed with barely concealed disdain. "Carry on." Manually. As his footsteps faded, Sarah returned to her work, hands moving across the quantum matrices with practiced precision. The Valerians might mock her primitive methods, but she understood quantum mechanics better than most. That understanding had earned her top honors at MIT, a fast-track position at Stellar Cores. And then, she pushed the memory away. Her firing from Stellar Cores still stung. Dangerous theoretical approaches, they'd said. Untested methodologies. Too much risk. Now here she was, the only human on a station of 500 Valerians, doing maintenance work that would have been beneath her as a freshman. Something flickered in the corner of her vision. Sarah turned, expecting another Valerian come to criticize her work. The maintenance shaft was empty. But there, another flicker, like reality itself having a hiccup. She'd been seeing these quantum distortions more frequently lately. According to her handheld scanner, they didn't exist. But she could see them. The distortion pulsed, and for a moment, Sarah saw patterns in the quantum field she'd never noticed before. Beautiful, complex patterns that seemed to dance just at the edge of comprehension. Her hand reached out instinctively. "Human Chen." Zylix's voice shattered her concentration. "The efficiency rating has dropped another 0.02%. The patterns vanished. Sarah sighed and returned to her work, but her mind kept returning to what she'd seen. There was something there, something the Valerians with all their advanced technology couldn't perceive. Or wouldn't perceive. Hours later, as her shift ended, Sarah made her way through the station's crystalline corridors toward her tiny quarters. Valerians passed her without acknowledgement, their bodies humming with quantum energies she wasn't supposed to be able to detect. But lately, she'd been seeing more and more. Patterns in their movement, fluctuations in their energy fields, ripples in reality itself. Her quarters were barely larger than a storage closet, tucked away in a maintenance section of the station. Sarah collapsed onto her narrow bunk. But sleep wouldn't come. The patterns she'd seen today haunted her thoughts. She pulled out her personal tablet, Earth technology, considered hopelessly primitive by Valerian standards, and began sketching what she'd observed. The drawings covered pages, intricate quantum patterns, energy flows, mathematical relationships that shouldn't be possible according to either human or Valerian physics. She was deep in calculations when her tablet chimed with an incoming message. "Maintenance alert. Critical failure in Sector 7 quantum coolant system. All available personnel report immediately." Sarah was moving before the message finished. Sector 7 housed the station's main power distribution hub. A coolant failure there could cascade through the entire station. She grabbed her toolkit and ran, her boots clanging against the crystal floors. She arrived to find chaos. Valerian engineers clustered around the failing system, their bodies resonating with stress frequencies. Officer Zilix stood at the center, barking orders. "The quantum matrices are destabilizing," one engineer reported. "Conventional rebalancing protocols are failing." "Increase power to the containment fields," Zilix ordered. "That will only accelerate the cascade," Sarah said before she could stop herself. The Valerians turned as one, looking down at her with expressions of shock and disdain. Zilix's crystalline form darkened. "Human Chen, you are not authorized to." "Look at the pattern," Sarah interrupted, pointing to the quantum matrices. "The energy isn't flowing randomly. There's a structure to the chaos." For a moment, she saw it clearly, the same patterns she'd been observing, but larger, more complex. The quantum field wasn't failing. It was changing, evolving into something new. Something beautiful. "Impossible," a Valerian engineer scoffed. "Human eyes cannot perceive quantum patterns at this level." But Sarah was already moving, her hands dancing across control panels with intuitive precision. She couldn't interface directly with the quantum matrices like the Valerians, but she could see how they wanted to flow. Instead of fighting the change, she guided it, like directing a river rather than trying to dam it. The warning alarms fell silent. The quantum matrices stabilized, settling into a new configuration that somehow felt more right than before. Sarah stepped back, breathing hard. Zilix studied the readouts, his crystalline form shifting through colors of confusion and disbelief. "This is unprecedented. The efficiency rating has increased by 3.7%. "Impossible," the same engineer repeated, but without conviction. Sarah said nothing. She was staring at her hands, which seemed to shimmer with a faint quantum resonance of their own. The patterns were everywhere now, more visible than ever. And somewhere in the quantum field, she felt something vast stirring, becoming aware of her just as she was becoming aware of it. A new alert sounded, not a warning, but a priority message. Sarah looked up to see Zilix reading it, his form paling to an almost transparent state. "The High Quantum Council," he announced, his melodic voice trembling slightly. "They're coming here. They want to see this anomaly for themselves." Every Valerian turned to stare at Sarah. She met their gaze steadily, even as her heart pounded. The pattern swirled around her, visible now even to her human eyes, promising changes that neither she nor the Valerians could predict. She'd wanted to prove herself, to show that humanity's approach to quantum mechanics wasn't primitive or limited. Now she had her chance, but she was beginning to suspect it would come at a price none of them fully understood. The quantum patterns pulsed, and somewhere in the vast field of reality, something ancient and powerful stirred in response to her touch. The High Quantum Council arrived 3 days after the incident in Sector 7. Sarah watched from her maintenance station as their ship docked, a massive crystalline structure that seemed to bend space around it. The quantum patterns she'd been seeing were strongest around the vessel, flowing like luminous rivers through reality itself. "Human Chen." Zilix's voice startled her from her observations. "The Council demands your presence." Sarah followed him through the station's upper levels, areas she'd never been authorized to enter before. The crystalline corridors grew wider, more ornate, the quantum energies more refined. Valerian engineers and officials stopped to stare as she passed, their forms shifting through colors of curiosity and concern. The council chambers took her breath away. The vast room was a perfect geodesic sphere, every surface alive with quantum energies that danced and flowed in patterns so complex they made her head spin. 5 figures awaited them, the High Quantum Council themselves, their crystalline forms so pure they were almost painful to look at. "So," the central figure spoke, its voice resonating on multiple quantum frequencies at once. "This is the human anomaly." Sarah stood straighter. "My name is Sarah Chen." "Yes," another council member said. "Former quantum engineer of Earth's stellar core. Dismissed for irregular methodologies." The counselor's form shifted to a shade of skepticism. And now you claim to see quantum patterns with human eyes. I don't claim anything, Sarah replied carefully. I simply observe what's there. Impossible, the third counselor declared. Human neural architecture lacks the necessary. A ripple passed through the quantum field, making every Valerian in the room shudder. Sarah saw it clearly, a massive distortion in the patterns, like a wave building before it breaks. Warning klaxons blared throughout the station. Multiple quantum anomalies detected. A computerized voice announced, "Standard containment protocols failing." The council members moved as one, their forms resonating as they interfaced with the station's systems. Sarah watched the patterns shift and twist, seeing the problem before the Valerians could identify it. "Stop," she shouted. "You're making it worse. The anomalies, they're not random. They're responding to your attempts to contain them." "Silence, human," the first counselor commanded. "We will not take instruction from." The quantum field convulsed. Reality itself seemed to ripple, and for a moment, Sarah saw something vast and ancient looking back at her through the patterns. A consciousness so alien it defied understanding, yet somehow familiar. And then it spoke to her. Not in words, but in quantum patterns that burned themselves into her mind. Images, concepts, and knowledge flooded her consciousness. She saw the birth of stars, the dance of quantum particles that underpinned reality, and something more, a way of understanding it all that transcended both human and Valerian physics. The patterns, she gasped, fighting to translate what she was seeing into words the Valerians might understand. They're not just energy flows. They're a language, a quantum language. The council members stared at her, their forms shifting through colors of disbelief and growing alarm. But Sarah was already moving, her hands dancing across the nearest control panel with intuitive certainty. She couldn't interface directly with the quantum matrices like the Valerians, but she could see how they wanted to move, how they needed to flow. "Stop her," one of the counselors ordered, but Xylix held up a restraining hand, his form showing colors Sarah had never seen before. "Wait," he said. "Look." The quantum anomalies were responding to her touch, the chaotic patterns smoothing out, finding new harmonies. Sarah worked with feverish intensity, guided by the knowledge burning in her mind. She wasn't fighting the quantum field anymore. She was dancing with it, leading it through steps to a music only she could hear. The warning klaxons fell silent. The quantum field stabilized, but not in its previous configuration. New patterns emerged, more complex and beautiful than before. The council members studied the readouts, their forms shifting through colors of confusion and reluctant admiration. "This is," the first counselor began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. "Impossible," the second counselor finished, but the word held more wonder than dismissal now. Sarah barely heard them. The quantum patterns were clearer than ever, and with them came understanding. The entity she'd sensed, it was ancient, powerful, and it had been waiting for someone who could see the patterns differently, who could bridge the gap between quantum consciousness and linear thought. Waiting for her. The station's efficiency ratings, Xylix reported, his voice trembling slightly. They increased by 15% across all sectors. "Human," the first counselor addressed her, all arrogance gone from its tone. "What exactly did you do?" Sarah turned to face them, aware that her hands were glowing faintly with quantum energies that shouldn't be possible for a human to channel. "I didn't do anything," she said. "I just listened. The quantum field. It's alive, conscious, and it's been trying to communicate." "Preposterous," one of the counselors began, but fell silent as another ripple passed through the quantum field, gentler this time, almost like a caress. "The patterns have always been there," Sarah continued, understanding flowing through her like a river. "But you've been so focused on controlling them, on forcing them into your predetermined matrices, that you couldn't see what they were trying to become." The council members exchanged looks, their forms shifting through colors Sarah couldn't interpret. Finally, the first counselor spoke again. "You will be taken to the High Council facility on Velaris Prime," it declared. "Your abilities must be studied." Understood. Sarah felt a chill despite the warmth of the quantum energies surrounding her. She could see new patterns forming: political, social, strategic. The Valerians weren't just curious about her abilities. They were afraid of them. Afraid of what they might mean for their carefully ordered understanding of reality. But before anyone could move, the quantum field pulsed again. This time, the patterns formed themselves into a clear message that even the Valerians could see. A warning, written in the language of reality itself. The ancient consciousness was awakening fully, and it had chosen its messenger. The true test was just beginning. Everything changed in an instant. The quantum field surrounding the station erupted into chaos, patterns shifting and writhing like living things. Warning sirens blared as reality itself seemed to buckle under the strain. "Multiple quantum breaches detected," the station's AI announced. "Structural integrity compromised in sectors 3 through 7. The council chamber erupted into motion. Valerian officials rushed to interface with emergency systems, their crystalline forms resonating with panic frequencies. But Sarah stood motionless, watching the patterns unfold with growing understanding. "This isn't an accident," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "It's a test." The quantum consciousness that had touched her mind was stronger now, its presence impossible to ignore. Through its patterns, Sarah saw the truth. The station sat at the intersection of quantum ley lines, ancient flows of energy that predated both human and Valerian civilization. The recent disturbances weren't random. They were the awakening of something that had slumbered for eons. "Containment fields failing," a Valerian engineer reported. "Quantum cascade imminent. Evacuate the station," the first counselor ordered. "Begin emergency protocols." "No," Sarah interrupted. "Evacuation will tear the quantum fabric further. We need to stabilize the patterns, not run from them." The counselors turned to her, their forms shifting through colors of fear and anger. "You dare to command the High Council," one demanded. But Zillick stepped forward, his crystalline structure vibrating at an unusual frequency. "The human. Sarah, she was right before. Perhaps we should listen." A violent tremor rocked the station. Through the transparent walls, Sarah watched in horror as space itself began to distort, quantum energies warping the fabric of reality. The patterns were building toward something, a convergence point that could either herald transformation or total destruction. "Please," she said, meeting each counselor's gaze. "I can help, but I need you to trust me." The first counselor's form flickered through rapid color changes: doubt, fear, calculation, and finally, resignation. "Proceed." Sarah closed her eyes, opening her mind to the quantum patterns that surrounded them. The ancient consciousness touched her thoughts again, and this time she didn't resist. Understanding flooded through her, not just of quantum mechanics, but of the very nature of reality itself. "The station's quantum matrices," she said, eyes still closed. "They're not just power systems. They're part of something older, something your ancestors built without fully understanding what they'd tapped into." Her hands moved across the control panels, but she wasn't really using them. The quantum field responded directly to her thoughts now, patterns shifting and realigning at her command. It was like conducting an orchestra where every instrument was a thread of reality itself. "Impossible," a counselor whispered. "Her quantum resonance levels are exceeding Valerian parameters." Sarah barely heard them. She was deep in the patterns now, dancing with the quantum consciousness in a duet that transcended physical reality. The station's systems began to pulse in harmony with her adjustments, finding new rhythms, new configurations that hadn't existed before. "Look," Zillick said, his voice filled with wonder. "The patterns, they're stabilizing." But Sarah knew it wasn't over. The quantum consciousness was showing her something else, a coming storm, a convergence of energies that would dwarf these initial disturbances. The station's location wasn't an accident. It was a focal point, a nexus where multiple quantum realities intersected. The breach is sealing, one of the engineers reported. But these readings, they're unlike anything in our records. Sarah opened her eyes. The quantum patterns had changed, becoming more complex, more beautiful. The station hummed with new energies, its systems operating at levels the Valerians had never thought possible. But there was more. "It's coming," she said, her voice distant even to her own ears. "What we've seen so far was just the beginning. The quantum consciousness, it's not just trying to communicate, it's trying to warn us." The council members exchanged troubled looks. "Warn us about what?" the first counselor demanded. Before Sarah could answer, space itself seemed to tear open. A massive quantum vortex appeared outside the station, its patterns more complex and terrifying than anything she'd seen before. Through it, she glimpsed other realities, other dimensions, all converging on this point in space and time. "The nexus is destabilizing," she explained, translating the quantum language into words they could understand. "Your ancestors built this station on a quantum crossroads, but they never knew its true purpose. It's a gateway, and something is trying to come through." The Valerians stared at the vortex in horror, their forms paling to near transparency. But Sarah felt something else, a sense of purpose, of destiny. The quantum consciousness hadn't chosen her by accident. Human minds, unfettered by Valerian quantum technology, could see patterns in ways their crystalline brains couldn't process. "I know what we have to do," she said, stepping forward. The quantum pattern swirled around her like a storm, responding to her presence. "But you're not going to like it." The first counselor's form shifted to a color she'd never seen before, a mix of fear and desperate hope. "What are you proposing?" "We need to let it happen," Sarah said, watching the vortex grow. "The quantum consciousness isn't trying to destroy the station. It's trying to evolve it, to evolve us. But first, we have to let go of everything we think we know about quantum mechanics." The chamber fell silent except for the hum of raw quantum energy. Sarah stood at the center of it all, human eyes seeing patterns that had waited millennia to be recognized. The true test wasn't just about saving the station. It was about bridging the gap between organic consciousness and quantum reality. And as the vortex expanded, time itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if humanity's greatest strength, the ability to adapt, to see things differently, would prove to be the key to unlocking the universe's deepest mysteries. The quantum vortex pulsed with energies that defied comprehension, its swirling patterns threatening to tear reality apart. The Valerian High Council stood frozen, their crystalline forms refracting the chaos in prismatic displays of terror. But Sarah Chen saw something else in the maelstrom. Purpose, design, an intelligence so vast it made her human mind reel. "This station," she said, her voice steady despite the tremors racking the structure, "it's not just a maintenance facility. It's a key." The quantum consciousness flooded her mind with images, ancient civilizations that had mastered quantum mechanics long before the Valerians, vast networks of reality-spanning gateways, and a threat so enormous it could only be understood in quantum terms. "The balance is failing," Sarah translated, watching new patterns emerge in the chaos. "Reality itself is becoming unstable. The quantum consciousness, it's been maintaining the boundaries between dimensions for millennia, but it's weakening. It needs help." "Help." The first counselor's form flickered with disbelief. "From a human." "From all of us," Sarah corrected. She moved to the central control panel, her hands dancing across its surface. The quantum patterns responded to her touch, but it wasn't enough. "Your technology, your understanding of quantum matrices, it's advanced, but it's rigid. The consciousness needs something more adaptable." Another tremor rocked the station. Through the transparent walls, they watched as multiple quantum breaches began forming, reality fracturing like a broken mirror. "The station's quantum core is reaching critical levels," a Valerian engineer reported, panic frequencies distorting their voice. "We have minutes at most." Sarah closed her eyes, letting the quantum consciousness guide her deeper into the patterns. She saw it now. The station wasn't just built on a quantum nexus. It was designed to be a stabilizing force, an anchor point in the quantum storm. But its builders had left out one crucial component, an interface that could bridge the gap between organic thought and quantum reality. "I need your help," she said, opening her eyes to face the council. "All of you. The human mind sees patterns differently than Valerian consciousness, but your ability to interface directly with quantum matrices, we need both." The council members exchanged looks, their forms shifting through colors of doubt and fear. Finally, Zelik stepped forward. "I volunteer," he said, his crystalline structure resonating at a frequency that spoke of determination. One by one, other Valerians joined him. The first counselor was the last, their forms settling into a deep, resolute blue. "What must we do?" Sarah worked quickly, directing them to form a circle around her. The quantum patterns swirled more intensely now, responding to the combined presence of human intuition and Valerian technology. "Interface with the quantum matrices," she instructed, "but don't try to control them. Watch how they flow. Let me guide them." The Valerians began to glow as they connected with the station's systems. Sarah stood at the center, her mind open to both the quantum consciousness and the patterns of Valerian thought surrounding her. It was like being at the heart of a storm, feeling currents of reality itself flowing through her. "Now," she whispered, and began to dance. There was no other word for it. Her hands moved through the quantum field like a conductor leading an impossible orchestra. The Valerians' rigid control gave way to her fluid guidance, their combined energies creating new patterns, new possibilities. The quantum consciousness surged through her, using her human mind as a bridge. Through her, it could speak to the Valerian interfaces. Through them, it could access the station's vast quantum networks. And through all of them together, it could begin to heal the fractures in reality. The vortex outside the station began to change. Instead of chaotic energy, it took on structure, purpose. The quantum breaches started to seal themselves, reality knitting back together in patterns more complex and beautiful than before. The readings, a Valerian engineer gasped. "They're stabilizing. But these patterns, they shouldn't be possible." Sarah barely heard them. She was deep in communion with the quantum consciousness now, understanding at last its true purpose. The station wasn't just a maintenance facility or even a gateway. It was a seed, a starting point for something new. "Evolution," she breathed, the word carrying quantum harmonics that made the Valerians shiver. Not just technological evolution, but consciousness itself. The ability to perceive and interact with quantum reality directly. The patterns reached a crescendo. For one breathtaking moment, Sarah felt her consciousness expand beyond human limits. She saw the quantum network that spanned galaxies, the delicate balance of realities that the ancient consciousness had maintained for eons. And she saw something else, a future where human intuition and Valerian technology could work together to maintain that balance. The vortex collapsed in on itself, leaving behind a new kind of quantum field, stable but alive with possibilities. The station's systems hummed with power levels that exceeded anything in Valerian records, yet felt perfectly natural. Sarah opened her eyes to find every Valerian staring at her. Their forms shifted through colors she could now recognize. Awe, fear, respect, and something else. Hope. What did you do?" the first counselor asked. "Not me," Sarah said, feeling the quantum consciousness settle into its new configuration. "Us. We've become part of something larger than either of our species." The consciousness wasn't looking for servants or even guardians. It was looking for partners. She turned to face them fully, aware that she was glowing with quantum energies that no human should be able to channel. "This is just the beginning," she said, watching new patterns form in the quantum field around them. "The consciousness showed me more, other nexus points, other stations. Reality itself is changing, evolving. And it needs both of us, human intuition and Valerian precision, to guide that evolution. The first counselor stepped forward, their form settling into a color that spoke of decision. The High Council will need to discuss this development, but for now, they paused, shifting to a shade of formal recognition. Engineer Chen, we request your assistance in understanding these new patterns. Sarah smiled, feeling the quantum consciousness hum with approval. The universe was changing, and for once, humanity's so-called limitations had proven to be their greatest strength. 3 months after the quantum crisis, the maintenance station had become unrecognizable. Quantum patterns flowed through its corridors like living art, responding to the combined consciousness of its human and Valerian crew. Sarah Chen stood at a new type of control interface, one that merged human intuition with Valerian precision, and smiled as she watched the patterns dance. Still admiring your handiwork? Xylix asked, his crystalline form shimmering with colors that now seemed as natural to read as human expressions. Our handiwork, Sarah corrected, adjusting a quantum flow with a gesture. I still can't believe how much has changed. And it had changed, more than anyone could have predicted. News of the quantum breakthrough had spread rapidly through both human and Valerian space. The High Council, after much deliberation, had declared the station a joint research facility, the first of its kind where both species could study the new quantum interface technology together. The latest efficiency ratings are fascinating, Xylix said, displaying a holographic readout. The quantum consciousness's integration has improved performance by 300% across all sectors. Sarah nodded, watching new patterns form in the quantum field. The consciousness that had chosen her was now a constant presence, not controlling but guiding, showing both humans and Valerians new ways to perceive reality itself. Other humans had begun showing signs of quantum sensitivity, though none yet at her level. And the Valerians, for their part, were learning to loosen their rigid control over quantum mechanics, allowing for more intuitive interactions. Ambassador Chen, a young Valerian engineer, called from across the control room, using her new title. The Earth delegation has arrived. Sarah straightened her uniform, a new design that incorporated both human and Valerian elements, and headed for the docking bay. The quantum patterns swirled around her like old friends, their dance now as familiar as breathing. The Earth officials who stepped through the airlock tried to hide their awe, but Sarah could see their wonder in the quantum fluctuations around them. Among them was Director Matthews from Stellar Court, the same man who had fired her for her dangerous theoretical approaches. Welcome to Nexus Station, Sarah greeted them, deliberately using both verbal and quantum harmonics that made the Valerian crew members hum in approval. Remarkable, Matthews breathed, staring at the quantum patterns visible even to untrained human eyes. When we received the reports, we thought they were exaggerated, but this is just the beginning. Sarah finished. She gestured, and a holographic display materialized, showing the network of quantum nexus points they'd discovered throughout the galaxy. The ancient consciousness didn't just show us how to stabilize this station. It revealed a whole network of them, waiting to be reactivated. The quantum field pulsed with anticipation. Through it, Sarah could feel the consciousness's satisfaction. It had waited eons for species capable of working together, of combining different approaches to quantum mechanics. The Valerians' precision and humans' intuition weren't opposing forces. They were complementary aspects of a greater whole. We've already identified 3 more nexus points within range, Xylix added, joining them. Each one will require both human and Valerian crews working in harmony to activate. And the quantum consciousness? Matthews asked. Is it safe? Sarah smiled, feeling the ancient entity's amusement. It's not about safety, Director. It's about growth. Evolution. The consciousness isn't controlling us. It's teaching us. Both humans and Valerians. We're learning to see reality as it truly is, not as we assumed it to be. As if to emphasize her point, the quantum patterns around them shifted, forming complex mathematical equations that made the Earth scientists gasp. Sarah watched their expressions change from skepticism to wonder, the same journey she'd taken months ago. The High Council has approved an expansion program, she continued, bringing up more detailed plans. Joint human-Valerian crews, trained in the new quantum interface techniques, will begin exploring and reactivating the ancient network. We're calling it the Quantum Harmony Initiative. And you'll be leading it? Matthews asked, a note of irony in his voice as he remembered dismissing her theories. Co-leading, Sarah corrected, nodding to Zilix. That's the whole point. Neither species can do this alone. The consciousness showed us that the universe isn't just quantum mechanics, it's quantum harmony. Different approaches, different perspectives, working together to create something greater than the sum of its parts. The quantum field hummed with approval, and Sarah felt the consciousness's satisfaction. Around them, human and Valerian crew members worked together seamlessly, their different approaches to quantum mechanics creating new possibilities neither species had imagined before. A new alert chimed. Another quantum anomaly detected at a distant nexus point. But this time, there was no fear in the crew's response. They understood now that such anomalies weren't threats but opportunities. The quantum consciousness had chosen them, all of them, to help guide the evolution of reality itself. Shall we begin the briefing? Sarah asked, watching the Earth officials still trying to process everything they were seeing. Actually, Matthews said slowly, I believe we owe you an apology first. Your dangerous theoretical approaches seem to have opened up possibilities we never imagined. Sarah shook her head, feeling the quantum patterns swirl around them. No apologies needed, Director. Sometimes the most profound discoveries come from being pushed out of our comfort zones. I had to lose everything I thought I knew about quantum mechanics to discover what was really possible. She turned to face the viewport, where the quantum nexus point shimmered with potential. Human and Valerian crew members moved around her, their different approaches to reality, creating a harmony that the ancient consciousness had waited millennia to achieve. The universe isn't just mechanics, she said softly, watching new patterns form. It's music, and we're all learning to play together. The quantum consciousness pulsed with approval, and somewhere in the vast network of reality, another nexus point began to awaken, waiting for this new partnership of human and Valerian to help it evolve. The future was unwritten, but for the first time, they would write it together, in the language of quantum harmony.